Our next panel, Case Study, AI plus Life Sciences, will be moderated by Karina Barao, Associate Director for Governance at SCSP. Please welcome our panelists, Wang, Public Sector Principal at Sandbox AQ, David Fuller, Co-founder and CEO of Artificial, Dr. Henry Lee, CEO of Cultivarium, and Dr. Johnny Yu, co-founder and CSO of Tahoe Therapeutics.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Karina Barao, and I'd like to thank you all for being here today at the AI plus Science Summit hosted by SCSP. I'm delighted to be joined today by these amazing panelists who are each tackling different pieces of the life sciences ecosystem. We have here with us today David Fuller from Artificial, Henry Lee from Cultivarium, Johnny Yu from Tahoe Therapeutics, and as well as Wang from Sandbox AQ. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. The life sciences sector was one of the earliest adopters of artificial intelligence. So I'd like to kick things off by asking each of you the following question. Please say a little bit about yourselves and tell us one lesson other industries can learn from the life sciences experience with AI. I'll start with you, David.
Great. So I think the number one thing that has been resonant as a theme throughout pretty much every talk is the availability of data in a standardized format. The places where foundational models have been able to be created within the life sciences are fundamentally because someone created a data standard and then produced voluminous amounts of data that could be learned on by a model. So where we're succeeding in the life sciences is where we had foresight and the capability to encode things digitally and then produce huge amounts of data. Where we're failing, we have the opposite problem. So the number one thing to me is focus on the data. The models will come. AI is evolving rapidly, and the specificity and utility of the models is predicated on data.
Henry?
Great, thanks. So I come from a computational background, and I've spent the last 20 years as an experimentalist in biology. So what I would say is I love the idea of computational sciences becoming more mature and driving innovation in biology. Where we found challenges, and where I would encourage others, is that talk to your scientists and help them understand that these tools are still developing. And they're developing at an enormously exciting pace. And so we don't need them to be perfect. We don't need them to be deterministic right now. And we should build for the future. So we spend a lot of time talking about whether or not a particular model is to be trusted to the T. And really, at this point, we should be thinking about how can we better use the technologies we have to accelerate the work, and how do we actually get to the end result? How do we iterate? And how do we actually develop the learnings to learn faster? Thanks.
Johnny.
Great to meet you all. I'm Johnny. I would describe myself as a technologist, scientist turned founder. So I come from the Bay Area ecosystem. Tahoe Therapeutics is a venture-backed company, blue chip, VCs, Series A company now. And our core capability is generating frontier-scale data sets to power the next generation of Nobel Prize winning AI in biology, which is the virtual cell. Some of you may have heard of it. And I think what David said actually resonates a lot in terms of data. And the way that I frame it is that the reason ChatGPT succeeded is because the internet existed for 20 years. And in life science, the internet of proteins existed, and that resulted in one Nobel Prize, AlphaFold protein language models. And what we're building, and what I think is going to happen in the next 5 years, is there's going to be that same moment, but for virtual cells. And so that is the specific data type that we're generating, and we're pushing forward on that front.
Kat?
Good afternoon, everyone. How was your lunch? So my name is Wang. I am our principal of the public sector here at Sandbox AQ, and we live in the strategic intersection between AI and quantum, both topics that we've heard a lot about today. So to answer your question, Karina, we're at a precipice of a very exciting moment right now, where I see a lot of industry moving as we've, in the commercial space, in many industries seen a lot of automation. This is inherently built into the way that we do business every day. That isn't always available, specifically in the life sciences, where clinical trials and drug discovery and research in general, you cannot make time go faster. Well, with AI, now you can. And in many cases, at least in the world that I live in, we wake up in the morning and we say, well, we're not saving lives. So guess what? Everyone in here is. And guess what? AI has the power to do that now. So where I'm most excited to see AI and quantum accelerate within life sciences is truly discovering capabilities and exploring into areas where we would consider traditionally undruggable diseases, right? Getting enough not only data-backed, science-backed computational models to do massive quantities of simulations to reduce overall cost and time for drug discovery, but also just advancements in just the overall human condition and our ability to function as a global species.
Thanks, Kat. Agentic AI use cases have soared just in the last year. David, Artificial is focused on automating lab infrastructure. What bottlenecks in life sciences R&D are you guys trying to solve? And I'd like to learn more about your new AI agent as well.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. So there's a fundamental disconnect that exists in the life sciences discovery process, which is basically, on the one hand, you have these amazing scientists who are using tools that are largely categorized as informatics. And you're going to have foundational models over there that help them do things like, hey, what protein should I generate? Then there's this huge tech transfer gap that's basically, how do I take my scientific design and translate it into a wet lab to actually synthesize it, test it, validate it, produce it, turn it into a tangible physical thing? That loss is why pharma companies have this aggressive pursuit of optimizing the speed of drug discovery in what they call a design, make, test, analyze loop. So we have created a set of agents that takes natural language scientific intent and maps it into operational wet lab execution. In plain terms, it's the scientist says what it wants to have happen, and the agents facilitate that in a wet lab. So that huge tech transfer cost we aim to reduce. I think people have said it multiple times. I just want to reiterate, agentic AI is an amazing tool, and you have to actually, I hate anthropomorphization or personification of technology as a roboticist, but I actually think you need to retrain your brain to visualize a swarm or series of named agents that are part of your team that you create that use your specific data to make decisions specifically for you. So if I'm a pharma company, the key thing is can I bring my data to the agents? Because that will be the specific knowledge that makes these agents unique to the pharma company. And so we've created a swarm of virtual team members that facilitate what would have normally been done by a very large group of folks in a wet lab. It's amazing, transformative. It's going to happen everywhere. It's awesome in the biblical sense.
Johnny, in that same vein, Tahoe has built what you call the world's largest single-cell drug response dataset, Tahoe 100 million. You then launched Tahoe Dive, which is an AI agent that biologists can use and explore with. What has been the research community's reaction to such tools?
Yeah, and I think just to frame what that data set means, over the past 10 years, there's been this method called single-cell RNA sequencing. Initially, we were super excited about doing 80 cells. And over the past decade, we collected 80 million cells. At the end of last year, we generated a data set in our lab with about a team of 100 million cells. So we doubled the world's publicly available data, and we released it in February. But to your question, Karina, we actually realized pretty quickly that just having this data, having the ones and zeros behind it, even though you had drugs, you had cells, had cancer patients all behind it, you needed a way to enable not just the 3 bioinformatics scientists sitting in a big pharma that knew how to work with it, you needed to enable any biologist, and even more broadly, anyone who had a scientific question. And so that's why we built Tahoe Dive. And the difference is that it's not just an LLM, it's an LLM that is actually going into the data, and you ask it a question and does custom analyses for you to get answer. And the reason I think that this is such a mindset change and also so important in our life sciences field is that data is everything. Like everything you do in the lab is to produce data. And so if you don't have an agent, a co-pilot with you to be able to ask questions of the data, then you're stuck to doing it yourself. And so for us, we've seen basically pharmas have been interested, oh wow, I can do this. The SVP, the CSO can ask questions and do that same kind of analysis. So we've gone from basically N of 3 to N of 3,000 of people that can actually interact with it.
I'd like to shift gears a little bit and move on to AI and quantum applications. Kat, how are AI tools combined with high-performance sensors helping drive breakthroughs in life sciences, like helping with chronic disease mitigation like cardiovascular disease?
Yeah, so we took a very different approach to AI and to quantum in particular. A lot of what we've been talking about today is large language modeling, right, based off of the observable internet. We decided that it would probably be much more effective to train AI models based off of core principles within physics. So we trained our large quantitative models focusing specifically on scientific data, right? It's not going to spit out languages, it's not going to spit out text, it's going to spit out actual computational research that is going to help you with simulations. Now, this underlying software has allowed us to do a lot of really cool things with very prominent entities in the medical and biopharma space. So a good example of this is Parkinson's. So Michael J. Fox Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. We've been working specifically with them to aggregate the wealth of data that they've done and reach very significant milestones as we look at neurodegeneration. With cardiovascular, for example, I think the going average is 1.5 people die a minute around the world due to cardiovascular disease. In some countries, this is the number one reason for death. So if we can do a better job utilizing this large quantitative model, taking a look at the actual magnetocardiography picture from someone who is suffering from cardiovascular disease, shift away the signal from the noise. A lot of noise is produced in hospitals. Even the fact that there's an elevator within a hospital could create noise within the readings for the physicians. So understanding this underlying large quantitative model set to support these types of life-saving capabilities is really where we're seeing a lot of advancements.
Thanks. I'd like to turn our attention to an interesting AI use case. Henry, Cultivarium focuses on what's called non-model organisms. Can you help the audience understand what those are and why your team chose to focus on them as opposed to other types of organisms?
Great. Thanks for that question. So I know we're at an AI plus science summit, and now I'm going to have to unpack some of that science, what model means, and what aspect of biology we focus on. So model here for us in the biological sense is about what organisms do we work with in the lab. Cultivarium focuses on non-model organisms in a way you can intuitively think about this as the dark matter for biology. So we have model systems, which we've worked on, E. coli or yeast, and we have those because they're easy to grow and they're easy to work with. And so scientists over time have poured effort into those organisms. They've been the backbone of a lot of our scientific understanding and even applications. So what's exciting about non-model organisms? Well, non-model organisms are all around us. They live in specialized environments, austere environments. They have enormous capabilities that model systems don't have, and we would like to access them, right? So whether or not you're talking about biomanufacturing or health or resilience across a lot of different application spaces, Cultivarium builds a suite of technologies so that you can work with non-model organisms. So we build biological tools, software tools, and hardware tools. And we think that by having a Cultivarium exist in the ecosystem, this is a bet in our portfolio of bets so that we can remain competitive in science and technology in the global stage.
As a follow-up to that, given that, assuming with that type of an environment, there will be limited data, where has AI made the biggest difference, do you think?
Sure. So we use AI and try to use AI across everything we do. And so what has been said many times today is AI is an accelerant. We use it on a number of different ways. We use it to design new proteins. We use it to use DNA language models to design new genetic parts for these non-model organisms. That's one set of work that, powered by the advances that have won Nobel Prizes, we've been able to leverage and exploit. We also are using the tools that foundation models, the ChatGPTs and the Claudes of the world, we are learning from publications. And so we're going through the vast knowledge that has been accumulated across the history of science, and we're trying to pull out those rare instances that scientists have dared to work on non-model organisms in history, and we're trying to pull out patterns so that we can build a framework so when we are interested in a particular organism, no matter what it is or where it is, we then have the tools to work with them. Now, one of the things that we have found, and this is really relating to what David has brought up, is that we need to be collecting more data in biology. So, what does that actually mean? Here's one aspect that we are collecting more data. As of today, we are announcing access to one of our tools called PRISM. And what it does is we are trying to tackle the problem of lost knowledge. So you might be asking, what are you talking about, this lost knowledge? Well, science is built on publications. And publications, despite what we would want it to be, it's not a perfect and comprehensive record of what happens in the lab, right? And let's just also admit that some of it is written for a good story, much of it is written post facto after you've completed some work in the lab, and we've had a lot of folks be really interested in using AI models to then reason through what exists in literature. But that is a biased set of data. Instead, what we've built as PRISM is we've built an AI assistant where you don on smart glasses, and experimentalists can then focus on the work that is already very complex and what they're trying to achieve. We use AI to document what you say and what you see. We auto-document that as a protocol. We use AI to look at where things deviate from what you planned on doing, and we think that having that record, that raw feed of science, then becomes a really powerful tool and a really powerful data set that you can then learn off of. In the same way that super colliders and astronomers are collecting terabytes of data, in biology, we're actually not collecting that much. And so that's another piece of the AI puzzle that we're using.
Thanks for that. So we've discussed the need for high-quality data, the use of AI agents, as well as quantum applications. Let's now dive a little bit further into the future of the life sciences sector. So David, this one's for you. What key technology innovations and policies do you think are still needed to accelerate life sciences and make labs run faster?
Yeah, I think fundamentally if you start with what is an agent, the answer to that kind of unfolds pretty quickly. So an agent is a reasoning model. Okay, we heard Claude, we heard ChatGPT. Those are only going to get better, they're amazing. So I need a reasoning model. And we can almost take it, I hate to even say this, we can almost take it as a foregone conclusion that we're gonna have really good reasoning models that surpass humans relatively soon. But then what else does it need? Okay, I've already harped on data. So we need to have data standards as a matter of policy such that the public and private sector are producing the data sets that we need for scientific insight. Those are key to driving all of the other model development that we need. And then a point we haven't talked about, but you just alluded to, and I think is really another form of policy. You know, when I started the company, one of the things that happened was COVID. It's a great time to start a company. I happened to download 19 different national agencies' publication of the early COVID diagnostics. They were written in various forms and various, degrees of formalism, but the one thing that they shared in common is you couldn't repeat them. They were difficult to share automatically, and there was no digital structure to describe an experiment that was faithful. So there's a crisis of repeatability and reliability in both publications and in our diagnostics. So we need standards that define a digital structure for experiments, because those are the tools that agents need to then execute things. And so when the next pandemic happens, if a lab writes an experiment, it's immediately globally digitally transferable, used by scientists and by agents. So the future is standard policies around data sets that are critical for science. And frankly, at this point in humanity's existence, we ought to be able to describe an experiment that's repeatable digitally.
Thanks for that. Johnny, you mentioned earlier how Tahoe is building virtual cells. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how this is going to be, a game changer for drug discovery?
Yeah, I think we're actually at this point in time where we're before ChatGPT. I think if you had talked to OpenAI in like 2017, you'd come away and be like, okay, they're building chatbots, cool, whatever, right? And I think that's kind of the perspective on virtual cells. But when you look at a virtual cell, what you're actually talking about is the ability to simulate life. Because a cell is the same kind of organism. It's the base fundamental building block Lego of every single thing. Model organisms, humans, disease, cancer, etc. And so imagine if you had a virtual cell, you could say, I want to take this drug, which I think might work, and see what it's going to do in 5 organ systems, in the brain, in the liver, in the kidney. And you would know. You can do the opposite and say, I want something to hit this cancer, but leave everything else safe. I just want to hit this brain cell that has Alzheimer's, but leave everything else. So the promise of the virtual cell is actually a foundational tool that whoever has access to the best one is going to build the best drugs, is going to be able to engineer actually biology. And I think we're really at the beginning of it. But all of the promise of virtual cell comes back to the same thing, data sets. So, for example, our data set, when you trained a new virtual cell model on our data set, Tahoe 100 million, versus publicly available data, our data set performed way better. And the core reason comes back to quality and unification of data standards. And to David's point, basically, if you have 100 or 1,000 labs doing artisanal experiments over a decade, you're going to get effects that come from somebody doing something slightly differently, or the temperature change in their lab that day. And so the real power of what we're doing is we're building frontier models, frontier data sets to enable frontier models. Yep. And I'll just give a hot take here. I'm sorry, don't want to go too long. Is that I just want to highlight we are a venture-backed, purely venture-backed academic spin-out, building drugs, therapeutics, in a backdrop of needing to produce drugs in a really bad biotech market. But we generated the largest academic data set in 3 months with 5 people. And so I just want to kind of point out that despite the massive amount of biomedical funding, the leading edge of even the biology side is still private. And if that's the case, how do we actually fund something that's not just going to be in one pharma company or at an enterprise in a different country? And I think that's something that we really need to think about from a policy side.
Kat, do you want to add to that point?
Yeah, one thing that Johnny said, I really love this point, is AI has traditionally been used as a mechanism to understand correlation, right? But when you start to think about real why molecules do what they do, now we start to branch into the world of causation. And in a data-scarce environment, so this is part of the reason why we have undruggable diseases, is we can also start thinking about utilizing AI and these models, these quantitative models, to generate data, right? These permutations of data to understand not only correlation, but causation as well. So one of the best stories that I love to use is back in the 1800s, Japanese sailors were mysteriously getting ill that they thought was due to some kind of infection. Well, it took scientists a lot of research to find out that it was because of a vitamin B1 deficiency. And the ones that weren't dying were the ones that were eating millet, as opposed to what the social elite were eating, which was just plain white rice. Like, how many new predictive things can we start to identify? How can we start to reduce the long-term risks of new drugs and treatments that we're introducing by generating this new forms of synthetic data, understanding causation, and then thus accelerating stronger, more effective, higher potency drugs and treatments. Like, that is the future which we should be driving towards, and it's something we need to embrace quickly from an AI perspective.
Kat, really quick, staying on you, what do you see as the next leap for the AI plus quantum in the life sciences? What are you predicting over here?
I would say the biggest leap is not technology, it is psychological. And I'll explain the reason why I feel this way. Every other country out there that is trying to win the quantum race, that is trying to really double down on AI and the pharmaceutical, the biotech revolution, is not taking away jobs. They are adding more jobs and accelerating it with AI. So any academic, any business that is thinking, I'm going to apply AI and make my workforce more automated is approaching it in the wrong way. We should be adding more researchers, activating every single person, and turning them into scientists. I think the biggest leap forward is acknowledging that AI and revolutions in life science aren't going to come from billion-dollar tech labs. If done properly, it could come from a child who has the courage, the curiosity, and now the compute to ask, what if?
Thank you. So I don't know how, but we are almost out of time here. So for a quick lightning round, I'd like each of you in under 30 seconds to answer the following question. It's a two-parter. So if we fast forward 5 years, what is the most significant change you anticipate in how AI will reshape the life sciences? And what do you think the United States should be doing to stay prepared for that moment? Over to you, David.
Yeah, I think the number one transformation in life sciences, particularly in the area that I'm focused on, is I believe we will be producing more drugs more quickly with AIs guiding the experimentation. So today we're talking about self-driving labs where the AI is in the loop with a scientist. The curious experimental AI that's teaching itself through high throughput experimentation is definitely going to be here and will transform the rate of drugs that we produce. Now, which of those drugs will be the ones we produce, we leave to the pharma companies. And the second part of the question was what?
What should the United States be doing to prepare for that moment?
Oh, I believe that, it's a repetitive theme. We must have public-private standardization of key elements of data for life sciences. I just drumbeat that. And second, we need to standardize how to describe experimentation so that it's repeatable and shareable. And we need to drive repeatable experiments with standard data across the country. All our national labs, all our academics, all our private institutions.
Henry?
So if I were to have my way, I'd ask that we try to rethink and try to reanalyze some of the assumptions that we have. AI is fundamentally a disruptive technology. Why should we simply tack it on to existing structures? I think that there is a space for what people have called incremental work. There is a space for scouting the horizon work. If we want to compete, we should be doing the work that we believe we should be doing while trying to chart shortcuts or a better path forward. What does that mean? I am most interested and excited about once you have intelligence that some have called too cheap to meter. We are now bottlenecked by how do you act? How do you actually take information and put it back into the physical world? We heard from material scientist people who have talked about we had the materials, the metals age, right? The stone, the steel. We're now in the information age. AI is going to help us fulfill, if I were to be prophetic, the information age. And the next age, I believe, goes back into the physical world. So what I would love to see is more opportunity for every American to now participate in innovative manufacturing, innovative research. I go around and I meet lots of people who want to contribute. They don't know how. They want a pathway to be able to work in a lab, work in a manufacturing plant. And so I think we need to be thinking not only about vocation, but how do we actually get the people who want to contribute to do it.
Johnny?
Yeah, I think mine is very simple. I think in 5 years, there will be a Nobel on the way for virtual cells. And I think everybody will know what a virtual cell is. And we'll be past that where we're actually talking about control, access, application. And this goes straight to the policy thing, which is what I mentioned earlier, is that my hot take is we are totally missing the boat here. Like for a company like us, we've got 15 people. I have to go to a boardroom in Silicon Valley and Palo Alto to ask venture capitalists from Silicon Valley for money to do the work that we should be doing, that the NIH should be doing, that they can't. I think it's a failure of vision, and I think it's a failure of leadership on all of our parts. And I think someone's going to own that, and I think whoever owns the data is going to own the virtual cell.
So by factor of having my fellow panelists here and everyone here, there's no shortage of creativity and innovation that we can tap into. I think the single biggest mover that we can focus on for the betterment of life sciences and humanity in general is the talent piece. Everybody, every child. I mean, what we've heard today that there's programs going on for K through 12, it's not enough. We need every single child to understand the true ramifications of AI built into what they do today. Why do I still know the quadratic formula when my TA83 calculator could do it for me in the 1990s? That is what I'm talking about. We need to embed that into the curriculum everywhere so that we can unlock that true potential. And in terms of policy, one thing that I would add, my colleague from Google brought up earlier today, none of this matters if we cannot secure the IP that we're generating. Cybersecurity is absolutely critical. Our high-value assets, my man over there giving me the thumbs up, are the key to making sure that this technology stays safe and productive.
And on that point, please join me in thanking our panelists for being with us today.